Good afternoon, everyone. Craig Simpson from Radiant Creators and myself just did a full 2-hour interview. I know you're going to like the content of it. It's more on the vibrational frequency side of things, in addition to getting your mind, body, and spirit ready for the changes in the grand solar minimum. All the links are in the description box below for Radiant Creators, not only the podcast, the YouTube channel, and the website. So this is going to be part 1 through 4. Going to cut it up so wherever you are in the series, I'll leave the links in the screens at the end. So you can go ahead and just click and jump through part 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll leave up the full interview in case you want to view it that way, and also look for the podcast coming out. And again, everything is in the description box for all the links that you'll need, including social media and a way to get a hold of Craig after the interview.
Well, you definitely can see the importance of cryptocurrency, how it works in Venezuela, for instance. In Venezuela, looking at local Bitcoins, people buying Bitcoins there, and also Bitcoin volume as far as transactions, it's just off the charts. I think last week was an all-time high there in Venezuela. And if you look at the graph compared to before their economy collapsed and now, it's amazing. And then also another cryptocurrency, Dash. I think it's one of the top 100. Dash is up there. And the reason Dash has been used so much there is because you don't need internet access to do Dash transactions. You can do it via text. You can text them back and forth. And so something that I know I look into that I've been studying is the ability to make cryptocurrency transactions without internet. You know, person to person. Dash helps, being able to text helps, but I do see something that I think is important to do is you can always print a paper wallet, and you can be Bitcoin, and you can just say, okay, I'm going to have, a bunch of printed pieces of paper basically that enable me to give somebody, $20 or $100 or $5, and you just have stacks of those because how do you do cryptocurrency transactions if you don't have an internet? If that's intermittent and not working. So a lot of these things are already happening in Venezuela. So I hope people are looking there if they have an interest in cryptocurrency and look at what's happening in Venezuela, because it's inevitably coming and a lot has been figured out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure has. And in my mind, the way it's working, looking into the future, how are these transactions going to get broadcast? You look at the quantum satellite network that China's been putting up there. Traditionally we have these cables across the ocean, but China's trying to put the broadcasting network above our heads in a satellite network that's not going to be affected by terrestrial effects. So they're already a step ahead. I mean, the Chinese, they have thousands of years of record. They know exactly what's going to happen this turn of the grand solar minimum, and I believe they understand it's a much more powerful grand solar minimum or change in the sun. That's why they're over there in Africa investing all through the Sahel. They're trying to find a new food growing area. They would bequeath tens of thousands of square miles of desert just for putting investment money in. And guess what? All that desert area is suddenly full of grass to the point where the locust swarms and herds, or swarms of locusts are 4 generations deep in those locusts. They've never seen anything like it. All through the Middle East, the amount of locusts swimming around out there is unbelievable. You can see it from the satellites. That's how many locusts are flying through the air. That's all from just the grass. Now, luckily, they weren't growing plants, so that would have been eating corn, etc. But just the amount of natural grasses that grew allowed all these locusts to just, breed and continually, the carrying capacity suddenly increased 100-fold. So obviously the insect population as well. But I want to take out of my mind here for a second. The solutions that we need for providing power to, first of all, we're going to have to take everything indoor. At least a lot of our agriculture is going to need to go indoors. We're going to need power for the LED grow lights, fans, computer mechanisms to move the water, get the pumps going, like I say, fans, we need aeration, etc. I'm thinking magnetic motors. We're using 2 discs, but one's north-facing, one's south-facing, and once they start to spin, they continually push each other. We're using the Earth's magnetic field just on 2 discs full of magnets, neodymium magnets, to push each other. And then at the end of that, you can, since it's spinning, that's all you need is a spin, then you can generate electricity from that. Now, taking it out, why would I even mention that with quantum satellite network and China broadcasting and satellites? Because if you have a way to access those satellites as a point there, you have a magnetic motor powering your transmission device that can connect into the quantum satellite network. You become your own central bank, because everybody in your area will come to you, because you can actually do that. Instead of using paper chips, you can come back into actual broadcasting and getting those blockchain verification and updating everything through your network. If you can have access to a satellite uplink, and you also have reliable power, which you can create yourself, relying on the Earth's magnetic field. So that's where my mind is going, that far out into, wow, you can do all this, and I really want to get this magnetic motor finished myself so we can power some LED lights to show how much output can be steady. Because even if the Earth's magnetic field decreases due to the sun stepping down its output, there's still going to be way more than enough to power your motor. And my first thought for you would be Tesla, Marconi, and Brown. Oh, and Rife, Dr. Rife, R-I-F-E, to see what kind of healing properties could be done with electromagnetics, and also what kind of power can be generated just using magnets. These are things that have been suppressed from us for so long. Why should I need to buy power when I could create that power in my own home? On a little device that's about this big, I just don't get it. We've been so boxed in on the way we think. So people go, crazy about magnetic motors and blockchain up the satellite. Look at this guy. This is the way it should have been like 50 years ago or more. 100 years ago, we should have had these free energy devices. But now we really just need to start thinking out of the box. We shouldn't need in boxes to think outside of. We should be so experimental with our thoughts that any solution is a possible solution, because, as I say, this iteration to grand solar minimums, unlike anything we've ever seen. We have the best technology right now. Why shouldn't we utilize it in every way, shape, or form to help us get through this? And you talked about the mental and spiritual preparation earlier. Now we come to the physical. We're going to need to grow food, but you need to protect your food. You need to process your food, dehydrate it, store it. This all requires power somewhere. So, thinking out the box on how to use gravitational vortex power, magnetic motors, these types of things, where we need to go to, because you're not going to be able to rely on the traditional grid. It's going down for sure. So don't even rely on the grid in the future. You need to think. There's no. If you're seeing the interview, remember that break, maybe it'll be spliced together in the interview, but we're talking about magnetic motors to be able to drive LED systems and using gravitational vortex power, Dr. Rife, Dr. Brown, Nikola Tesla, and Marconi, and then our call dropped. Interesting, it just dropped. Locked up and dropped.
Yeah, that's really something. It's not too common. I mean, sometimes you get a little jitter, especially when you're using, video, but yeah, I've done interviews with people in other countries, Australia, and definitely it's unusual that a call hangs up completely and drops. So it's that would actually be a first in all the interviews that we've done. Actually, would be exactly that. So with alternative, forms of power like that, so would solar be off the table at that point? I mean, if a person has solar panels on their home or stashed away, is that going to continue functioning in a solar minimum?
It will, but some of the forecasts have put up to a 25% decline in the total overall output. So as we march forward, there's going to be declines in your solar output on the panels. So some companies are overbuilt by XYZ percentage to make up for the losses that are already built into the next 30-year model for what the sun's going to do with its output. But will it still be functional? There'll be a lot more volcanic ash in the air as well. A lot more cloud cover these days. If you notice, it's raining a lot, and there's a lot more cloud cover all over the place. Increasing cosmic rays. We're going to look for more cloud cover, galactic cosmic rays causing this band specifically, just so you know, market between 15,000 and 18,500 feet. This is where Heinrich Spensmark and his team have come up with the galactic cosmic rays bombarding our atmosphere as our magnetosphere weakens due to the sun weakening. That is where the main predominant band of increasing cloud cover is forming and shall form, 15,000, 18,500 feet. And I really encourage you to watch this free video on YouTube. It's called The Cloud Mystery. Again, The Cloud Mystery by Heinrich Stensmark. They detail about what's happened with our atmosphere going through these next 20 years. I mean, Rivers from the Sky is pretty much a short Cliff Note version And increased cloud cover, decreased agriculture production, and decreased solar panel output.
And you mentioned volcanic ash. So it is common, I believe, during the a grand solar minimum that there's increased volcanic activity.
Yeah, that's right. In the silica-rich magma chambers. So it's not every single volcano is affected by these. It's a specific type of magma, silica-rich magmas. So when you're looking at the effect regionally or continentally of a volcanic eruption, the further north the volcanic eruption is, the better, literally. I mean, it's still terrible for the regional area because the way the cloud cells are, taking one band of moisture, moving it to the next, moving to the next. So like the Hadley cell would be the most famous, 0 at the equator to 30 degrees north latitude. So if you have these eruptions that are equatorial, let's say Indonesia, they get carried literally from the 0 degree at the equator up to the 30, and then it just gets reblended with what's moving from 30 degrees to 60 degrees, and it just keeps getting carried north all the way to, hey, that's how they found all that volcanic ice or ash in the ice cores up in Greenland. It was carried through the cloud cells. So if you get something that occurs at, let's say, 30 degrees north latitude, it's only going to get carried north further up to the pole. That's it. It won't reverse itself and go back down to the equator. That's the whole thing. Is VEI 7, just really a word of warning. If you read on the news somewhere that there's a VEI 7 eruption, you should take the rest of the day off from work and go get as much money out of the bank as you can and go buy food that day. I know it's a little unfair to say go hoard food yourself, but be one of the prepared ones, because at that point, it'll take just mere days before they understand the ramifications of how much ash is coming out and down. And there's going to be a discernible difference in availability of food moving forward from that point. So I'll leave it right there without going into too much more detail on that. But if you see about a huge volcanic eruption, you need to take action right then. There's no waiting at that point. It's over. Like society, as you know, it begins a different end to itself that day when we get a VEI 7 eruption on this planet. What we've seen with like Mount Pinatubo, the high 5s, maybe a 6, it dropped global temperature 0.6 of a degree. Now the ash fall in itself was something, but it blew out over the Pacific, and there was some ash coming down in South Central America, North America too. We got a little bit of that. It did go around the world, turned all the sunsets really red, but you got to realize that was orders of magnitude smaller than something on a 7 or an 8. If we get something like a Tambora eruption again, this is causing a year without a summer, that would devastate our agriculture the very first year. So whatever was out there, it would start snowing in August. So we would lose all agriculture on the planet that very year. Now, depending on where we were in the planting and the harvesting cycle, and also depending on which hemisphere it was, very little time left to grow out of the ground, and the following year would be we would have almost no food production. Projections are going out. We can grow 20% of what we're going to have by 2028 to 2032. But if we get a huge eruption, that timeline is pushed back to that day. Pretty much the very next year, we'll have very little food production globally to bring it indoors. This is a skill set. Can you put a vertical grow tower in your house, set it up with LED lights, get the fans right, get your nutrient mix right, produce food? Or can you set up an old disused shopping mall as a growth center and then a processing center? Where's your power going to come from for that? These are the skill sets you're going to need moving forward. Anybody who can do that, I guarantee they will protect you, and you will never go hungry, and you will survive through this like you've never been treated before. You need high skill sets that provide high value, that will let people live. And if you can do that, they'll make sure you live, because you're going to make sure that they live. And that it's a symbiotic thing here. There's no selfishness. This whole paradigm we grew up in is get as much as you can. The person with the most toys wins. That's gone. You got to change the whole mental mind frame here of working together, providing value, and doing it in a way that helps everybody along the chain that's involved with what you're doing and how it touches out and moves that way.
Yeah, something you say about malls no longer being needed, being great growth centers That's very true because
Yeah.
you look at retail, it does appear to be failing recently. It's very easy to see. And you look at malls, and malls are starting to be shared workspaces. They're starting to be a lot of other things other than malls, so not a bad time to start doing that. Well, you mentioned skills that are good to have. Now, I know, of course, we need to look at growing food indoors, and that's something we should talk about. And there's some sponsors that you have that do, that we could talk about. But if a person wanted to start growing food indoors right now for themselves, what's a good avenue to approach that? I mean, like, of course, they're going to need power in the future, but like right now, today, a person wants to grow some food. What can they grow in their house, and where to look, how to get started?
Yeah, the easiest thing I would start with is sprouts, because you can get the very basics of the airflow to keep them from getting moldy inside. You're going to have to take little baby steps. You're not going to build out a full, 64 tower unit inside your house that's pushing out, 20 kg of vegetable a week. You're going to start small. Learn what too much water can do. And then after you grow the sprouts, if you don't eat them all, you're going to have a huge amount of stuff in your hands. So how do you save it? Growing, it's only about 20% of the total work involved in actually having food. Growing it, great, but then what do you do after you have the finished product? You can't consume it all at one time. So we start to need to think about storing it. Well, right now we have refrigerators, and that's great, but what if you have something you want to dry and turn into a powder? This thing, basil right here. Basil leaves are a great start, or moringa leaves. Just take these leaves, dry them in an oven, leave the door open in your oven, turn it to the very lowest setting, put it on a tray, and just dry them out until they get crispy dry. Put it in a bean grinder that you would use for coffee, and then, see how you can seal it somewhere in a little plastic sack. And then you want to take it the next step, then you got to think about a vacuum sealer so you can really tighten it up. And then think way out in the future, if you can make that into little square packs of whatever it is, those are tradable. Those are things that are easily carryable. You can move those, and then there's some value associated with it. And then if you want to take a step, get a scale, so you know exactly how much is in the pack. Like each of these is babies. The processing, dehydrating, and storage of your food is going to be one of your greatest assets as well. Growing it, it takes a lot of manpower to do that. A lot of fingers in the soil to do it. But once you get that done, you're going to have all this produce that you don't want to rot. So you're going to have to absolutely learn how to store it. Root cellars, learn from your grandparents. Go back in history. Fruit walls. How did they do all this stuff back in the 1600s when they didn't have refrigeration? You're going to have to relearn the wheel here, and just some of the incredible basics on how to keep your food after you grow it. So you mentioned my sponsor, trueleafmarket.com. There's no link associated with that. I'm just going to throw it out there. No affiliate link. It's just go to their site. They have sprouting guides, how-to guides. So even if you don't know what a sprout is or how to do it, go there, download the free PDFs. They got about 20 different things you can grow there for free. They're how-to guides. And this is another thing. Scour the internet right now. Quit watching your movies. Scour the internet for as much information you can download into PDFs. Possibly print that off if you have the money, and save those in a memory stick somewhere else offline. So even if the internet goes down, you still have those, and you can still plug them into your computer and take a look at them. How-to guides on everything you could possibly imagine. So think about yourself back in a pioneering lifestyle in, say, 1850. This is kind of where we're going to be going in the beginning until we can get our tech figured out, until the social chaos stops, until there's some stability in our weather, until our economies stabilize, until our governments stabilize. We're going to go through a tumultuous time here, but at the end of it, it will stabilize. But we just need to get through this, first puff of smoke, if you will, and then at the end, it's clean. So these are the kind of basic skills that you'll need, and I encourage you to do as much research as you can. Start growing stuff. Even if you have like a plastic throwaway bottle, just cut it, learn how to turn it upside down with some holes in it so you can get some drainage, and grow a water plant. Grow something you can eat. Even in your windowsill, that'll still work. Just grow anything. Seriously, anything. I don't care what you grow. You got to grow something this year.
to experiment, to try something. And I'll leave my tangent there because I can go on
No,
and on about how important food is.
no, it's good. Well, I think that it's very important to learn by doing because,
Yeah.
for one thing, it's great to have a closet full of sprout seeds and to have, and that's great. I mean, but I really think that we learn through doing. There's just no way around actually doing it. And so, vertical gardens are, very important. Those are great to have in your house. You can move them around to the windows during the day. You can have some grow lights on them. And it's amazing what you can create in a vertical garden right now. Hydroponics are not necessarily hard. You can do sprouts, you can do microgreens, and once you start doing that, you're going to find what works for you, what works in your climate, and you're going to find, I mean, the slightest things like, oh, these things are good after 6 days, but after 2 weeks, you don't want to eat it. I mean, there's
It's too tough. You can't. It's too stringy.
yeah, it doesn't work, and I'm even finding that microgreens work better than sprouting without soil. So you can kind of sprout on the screen, and you can have your greens like that. But I'm finding now I want to experiment more with microgreens grown in soil, just because it seems that you can just mow those down, then you can start composting that soil again, start over, and you don't have to clean that plastic grid basically with get all your sprouts out of it, which kind of ends up being a waste. So yeah, learn by doing. I mean, if you've got land, that's an amazing thing. Great, you can grow things on it, but grow things in your house. And really, that's just living a vibrant life. I really feel like we're in preparing for a solar minimum. Really, it's time to go back to living life as we used to and living life as we should. And I think really I think you mentioned, thrive during the coming global minimum. I mean, that's the idea. I think we can actually enter this situation thriving and then just continue
Yeah.
thriving through it, even though it will be challenging.
Yeah, I agree totally. And again, that's all about the mind frame of being thankful for what you have. This era that we live in right now, nobody's satiated. They all need the next thing. They all need the next fix, the next good, the next whatever. Oh, I need another one. I'm not happy now. I need more. Well, your first step into gratitude and being thankful is what you have right now in front of you. Every time I get a plate of food for me, it just takes on a whole new meaning of I understand why people, put their hands across the plate and give thanks for the food. Because what I see coming, that food's not going to be there. And there's going to be people that will be eating rotting food, gagging, throwing it back up so they can try to fill their belly with anything. And if you read about the accounts of the siege of Stalingrad, not Leningrad, they're two different. They both were sieged. But I highly encourage read about the Bosnian War, 1 Year in Hell. That's a great book to read about what people were eating. They were eating rotting food where they would vomit it back up, but they would re-eat it again after they vomited it because it was food to put in their body. That's sick. Go back to the siege of Stalingrad. They were eating the glue off the wallpaper. People were trading recipes on how to cook belts. They were cannibalizing people. So you don't think it's going to go into this. You're deluding yourself. We're going to go back in. And so many people are unprepared. So if you look back in history to see what has happened and how ugly it can get in humanity, you should be giving thanks for what you have right now and preparing for the future, because those that are prepared, even slightly prepared, are going to be the ones that are going to thrive. Because, these accounts that I'm reading, specifically with the Bosnian War here, those people that are even slightly prepared were the ones that everybody traded with, and the ones that everybody came to be able to get the information, and it seemed to be the focal point. Like those families with larger families and communities and streets that organize themselves to protect their areas, they had it tough. They were trying to get the fresh water, but they had it way better than most people that were, in that city besieged by snipers, etc. It's all about preparing just a little bit, just a little bit preparedness and understand what's going on and changing the mind and being thankful. Got off on a little bit there but truly you got to be thankful for what you have and understand that the simplest of pleasures are going to bring you the greatest amount of happiness moving forward.
Well, preparing mentally, physically, and spiritually, yeah, gratitude is a big one. And then also, knowing this is going to happen because it's a cycle, the same as winter and summer are cycles. This is just the thing with us humans. and maybe this is something I think we've been trained to do, and it's unfortunate. It's not a natural instinct, but it's something that it's been bred out of us. We've been trained to not see our natural instincts, is that we should see this coming. And you mentioned that the grand solar minimums, these do create certain leaps in evolution. I believe that was you that said that, and that really, I think many people are noticing something is not correct or things are not correct. So it seems that people are feeling something is not right, but they can't quite put their finger on what it is. And that's something I thought is really important with talking with you, is that we can tell people, this is what you're feeling. This is what you're feeling coming, and it's natural, and it's just a larger cycle. There's winter, there's summer, there's winter, there's summer, but within 400-year cycle, 1,000-year cycle, 7,000, 9,000, 18,000-year cycles, there's seasons that we're just not aware of because we're not told about them, and we don't have the instincts to be aware of them and feel them coming. So are people's instincts naturally reinvigorated as a solar minimum begins? I mean, do some people get it and start just taking action?
No, I'd absolutely say yes. I mean, I think it's actually part of our survival instinct in our DNA encoded in there. Whether you know you have it or you don't, it's definitely there for your survival. I mean, it's a species survival type of thing. And, the sun's going through changes electromagnetically. And since we're receivers ourselves, our spiritual bodies are antenna for reception from the greater flow of the universe, if you will, the consciousness construct of information that holds everything in the third dimension together. We're tapping into that. We're part of that. So you're instinctively, intuitively feeling these electromagnetic changes. So, I don't know if you know what the yugas are in the cycle in India about the energetic changes of the human psyche in terms of how we behave spiritually. It's in a cycle as well. It goes from the dark iron age, which we've been in for so many thousands of years now, and we're exiting out of that. So the vibrational changes, and when I talk about how fast energy vibrates, I really mean vibrational changes. As you can see, a sound wave vibrating faster, or an electrical wave vibrating faster with voltage amperage changes up and down. We're feeling the same thing. Our energetic state is changing. So when you look at these old archaic systems that were built, modified, and ingrained in these last 2,000 years of human history, they can't cope with the energetic changes anymore. They existed in the dark ages of the iron, the most densest, lowest possible energy humans can ever experience. We went through that in the last 700 years, specifically in the last 400. It didn't go any lower. On the Yuga Vedic chart going around, we just hit it can't go any lower. We literally hit the depths of the bottom of human lowest vibration. So every day coming out is vibrationally higher. So of course, old systems keeping us down are starting to disintegrate. People around the world are no longer accepting these reins of chains around them and this putting us into little boxes and limiting our perception of what's possible in this universe. It's no longer acceptable. Everybody's feeling it. There is a global sweep of perception and consciousness enhancement going on. The sun's doing its thing. Everybody feels something's wrong. The governments are no longer working correctly. Economy is twisting. People are feeling it. Nobody's accepting the old paradigms. And here we go right into something else. And it's all morphable and malleable at the moment. And, we're looking for great changes. And everybody's intuitively feeling it. And I'm glad you brought that up, because if you're listening, this is what you're feeling. This is what you're intuitively tapping into. The change on the sun. The change is about to sweep our planet. You're being protected by your own intuition. That's going to wake up. Something's different. Look around. Maybe you can't put the causation, but I hope this interview helps you put the causation to about what we're about to face in these next 30 years.
Yeah, and in the Adam and Eve story, a book that's out there that DuByne talks about, and I actually read it on this channel. I'm not an Audible reader, that is for sure, but I did read it if anybody wants to listen to it. I sat there and went through the chapters. In the Adam and Eve story, it talks about, and this is definitely an alternate, Genesis 1, 2, and 3, an alternate biblical interpretation, and there's a lot more in that book than just that. But The idea is that Eve knew. Eve saw it coming and told Adam. Like, our intuition knows and is telling us. So, yeah, if you feel like, hey, stuff's not right, this is why. And governments are definitely freaking out right now. I mean, something that gets me is censorship and the global warming scam, basically. And how do you think these two are working together? Because with the grand solar minimum and the climate definitely doing things that don't make sense, I'm just amazed at the censorship happening from mainstream media and governments. Like, for instance, you look at the middle of America, you know, our ability to grow food has greatly been screwed up, at least for this year. We have so much flooding, and people are drowning. There is tremendous suffering. You don't see any of that on the news. Zero. You just don't. But you see it on social media. You know, you see it firsthand accounts, people who post it, and it's really stifling because you look at the disaster going on there, and it's just this massive devastation has just been disappeared, basically. It's not happening. Most of America would have no idea it's happening unless they actually live there and are experiencing it. So I would just ask, the global warming scam and then the massive censorship when it comes to what the weather's actually doing, I would say, is that related to the Iron Age you're talking about? I mean, is that governments losing control? Because it seems like what are they doing? I'm not even sure how you pose the question. You know what I mean? What are the governments doing? They're letting people drown. They're giving us this con. And what the hell's going on?
Well, I'll start with they're trying to not mass panic everybody into creating a situation years before the real difficulties come where they're going to need the police state in place. And if you're looking for more information on the Grand Solar Minimum 30 minutes at a time, mini Ice Age Conversations podcast, anywhere podcasts are hosted across the net. And I've also begun to upload on Minds.com. If you're over on Minds, subscribe to Adapt 2030 and I'll keep a feed coming through with new information daily.